It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in a neighborhood where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. The trees stood still, the sky wore a soft shade of blue, and children had just begun spilling off yellow school buses, heading home for snacks and cartoons. Jack Turner, a mechanic and longtime resident of the town, was sipping lukewarm coffee at his garage when the phone rang. It was his ex-wife, Emily. Her voice wasn't just panicked, it was breaking. She said, "Sophie didn't come home." The bus driver confirmed she had gotten off at the usual stop. But from there, the little girl seemed to have vanished. Jack's heart stopped for a second. That walk from the bus stop to Emily's front door was barely 300 feet. 300 feet. Yet in that tiny stretch of sidewalk and lawn, his 9-year-old daughter had simply disappeared. Jack dropped everything and rushed toward her house. The street signs and traffic lights meant nothing in that moment. He ran red lights. He ignored honking cars. None of it mattered. By the time he got there, several members of his motorcycle club, the Iron Valiants, had already arrived. Word travels fast among men who share more than just engines and leather jackets. Emily stood in the yard, trembling, holding Sophie's backpack. It had been found in the bushes beside the mailbox. But something else was missing. The teddy bear Jack had given Sophie last Christmas, the one she named Mr. Buttons, was nowhere to be found. Jack had stitched a tiny tracking device inside that bear, just in case. He had always hoped it would never be needed. That hope was gone now. What started as a missing child report was about to set in motion something far greater than the man who took her could ever imagine. By the time Jack stepped out of his truck, the low rumble of engines filled the street. Dozens of motorcycles had already lined both curbs. These weren't just neighbors or friends. They were the Iron Valiants, the Brotherhood Jack had led for years. These men had weathered storms together, rebuilt homes after hurricanes, and once stopped a trafficking ring 3 towns over. And now, without needing to be asked, they were here. For Sophie, for Jack, Bear, a former Marine and Jack's closest friend in the club, held up his phone. The tracking signal from Mr. Buttons was live. Sophie was moving. Northbound, fast, along a stretch of highway leading out of town. Jack's stomach tightened. That road led into territory no decent man willingly entered. The kind of place where people vanished, and no questions were asked. It did not take long for Jack to put the pieces together. He knew who it had to be. Miguel Rojas, a name that brought a chill even on the warmest days. Rojas was not just a drug dealer. He was the kind of man who turned small towns into distribution hubs, rotting them from the inside. A month earlier, he had come to Jack's garage with a proposition. Use the garage as a cover for his shipments, offer storage, and in return, receive a slice of profit. Jack said no, firmly, without hesitation. Now, Sophie was missing. Jack realized this was no random crime. It was retaliation. A message. One sent not in words, but in the cruelest way imaginable. Bear clenched his fists. Jack's silence was answer enough. Everyone understood. This was not just about finding a missing child anymore. It was about standing against something bigger, darker. The kind of evil that grows only when good men do nothing. And none of them were willing to stand by and do nothing. Jack stood silently as the weight of reality settled on his shoulders. He had been in tough situations before: accidents on the road, friends lost in battle, and nights wondering if the world could get any darker. But nothing came close to the emptiness he felt staring at the bushes where his daughter's backpack had been found. It was not just fear that filled him, it was purpose. Bear brought the tracker screen closer. The signal had stopped moving. It now pulsed steadily from a remote location outside of town, too close to a known warehouse that had long been whispered about in late-night conversations. No one ever went near it unless they had something to hide. The Iron Valiants didn't need convincing. These men weren't just bikers. They were fathers, uncles, grandfathers. They had changed tires for single moms, delivered meals during blackouts, and fixed up schools when no one else did. And now, the call was louder than any engine they had ever ridden. They scattered in groups, some going to secure routes, others scouting exits. each one moving like part of a machine built for one thing: bringing Sophie home. Then, a truck pulled up just outside the clubhouse. Every man reached for the weapon closest to him, but the door opened slowly, and a man stepped out, holding something unexpected: his badge. Detective Sean Parker, once a local cop, now looked worn down by years of disappointment. He placed the badge on the ground and raised his hands. "I'm not here as a cop," he said, voice steady but tired. "I'm here as a father." The room held its breath. "My daughter vanished 3 years ago," Parker continued. "No leads, no suspects, but I know Miguel Rojas was behind it. I just never had proof. He works through shadows, using front men, bribes, and threats. He killed my partner and made it look like suicide. The system couldn't stop him, but maybe you can." Jack stepped forward cautiously. "Why now?" Parker pulled out a folder filled with photos. Surveillance stills, license plates, faces of scared children behind tinted windows. "Because he's not just holding your little girl. There are others, at least 14, all between 6 and 13. Some missing for months, some whose parents never even got a ransom call." The room erupted, not with shouting, but with something deeper: controlled fury. These weren't just strangers anymore. These were children who needed someone to care enough to fight. Parker continued, "I've been building a case for 2 years. But every time I get close, someone up the chain shuts it down. Lawyers, politicians, maybe even other cops. I've stopped trusting the system, but I still believe in doing what's right. That's why I came here." Jack looked around the room. No one was asking if this was risky. No one was asking if it was legal. They only wanted to know how they could help. "We move now," Jack said. "Quiet, clean, no showboating." The plan came together fast. First, they needed Rojas to believe Jack was coming alone. So Jack would go to the warehouse just as Rojas demanded. No backup, no threats, just a father with a desperate face and a promise of money. Meanwhile, Bear and Logan would lead a separate team to track the signal from Mr. Buttons. The building the signal came from was 20 minutes away from the warehouse, far enough to be out of sight, close enough to strike hard and fast. Ace, a skilled mechanic and drone expert, set up surveillance. They confirmed at least 20 men around the warehouse, all armed. But none seemed to be guarding the second location. That's where the children were, hidden, forgotten. Every detail was timed, radios checked, routes mapped. If any part of this went wrong, children could be lost forever. But Jack's voice never wavered. "We're not going to fail. Not this time." When the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack climbed onto his bike. He wore a plain jacket. No patches, no insignia. Just a father, riding into the night. The others watched him go, engines silent, hearts heavy. This was no longer about a business deal gone wrong. It was about innocence stolen and a community that refused to let that go unanswered. The night air was thick with tension as Jack approached the warehouse on Miller Road. He rode slowly, the single headlight of his bike cutting a narrow path through the dark. Alone, just as Rojas had demanded, the warehouse stood like a concrete tomb, surrounded by rusted fencing and shadows that moved like whispers. Jack parked without a word. In his hand, he carried a duffel bag not filled with money, but with weighted scrap metal. It was never about the cash. It was always about Sophie. Rojas stepped out of the shadows, flanked by men holding rifles. He looked confident, even amused. Jack could see it in his eyes. The kind of arrogance that comes from thinking the world plays by your rules. "You came alone," Rojas said, grinning, "like a good little father." Jack didn't respond right away. He looked around slowly, pretending to be unsure, pretending to be afraid. Then he spoke softly. "Where's my daughter?" Rojas tilted his head and shrugged. "Safe, for now, but you don't look like a man who brought payment." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And you don't look like a man who understands what's coming." Before Rojas could reply, the night exploded with sound. The distant thunder of engines, dozens at first, then hundreds echoed across the empty fields. One by one, motorcycles rolled into view, surrounding the warehouse like waves swallowing a rock. Rojas's smirk faded. The Iron Valiants had not come alone. They had brought allies. Other clubs. Other fathers. More than 200 strong. "You brought an army," Rojas muttered. Jack stepped closer. "You took a child. You took children. This was never business. This was war. The moment you touched our family." At the same time, Bear's team reached the building where the tracker had led them. They broke through the side entrance, not with chaos, but with precision. Inside, dim light revealed the truth. 14 children, tied and frightened, too afraid to even cry. Some had been missing for weeks. Sophie was in the far corner, holding Mr. Buttons to her chest, her little fingers gripping him tight. Bear crouched down, his voice gentle. "Your daddy sent us. You're safe now." The children were quickly untied and wrapped in jackets. They were cold, but alive. And for the first time in days, they were not alone. Back at the warehouse, Rojas realized too late that no backup was coming. His messages went unanswered. His soldiers hesitated. Some dropped their weapons. Some tried to run, but the bikers did not come to fight. They came to end something. Jack watched Rojas carefully. The man who had once threatened him now looked smaller, not just in stature, but in soul. "You don't understand," Rojas pleaded. "I never hurt her." Jack's voice was calm. "You planned to, and that's enough." And with that, the Iron Valiants took him. When the sun finally rose the next morning, it did not rise on the same world. The children were safe. Sophie was home, curled up in her bed with Mr. Buttons still in her arms. But Miguel Rojas was no longer the man he once was. He had been captured by the very people he thought he could threaten. And what happened inside that warehouse after the bikers took him, no one truly knew. Jack never spoke of it. Not to his club, not to the police, not even to Emily. But when the authorities arrived, what they found was enough to shake even the most hardened agents. Rojas confessed to everything, not just the kidnapping, but the trafficking network, the laundering schemes, the silent disappearances of families too afraid to speak. He told them names, locations, crimes they hadn't even discovered yet, and he begged for protection. He did not want freedom. He wanted walls, bars, and locks between him and the outside world. One federal agent, after reading the full confession, asked Jack a quiet question. "What did you do to him in there?" Jack paused for a long time. Then he answered in a voice low and steady. "I made sure he could never hurt another child, and I made sure he would remember why, every single day." There was no celebration, no parade, just silence. A silence that spoke of justice, served in a way the system never could. In the weeks that followed, the town slowly returned to its routine, but the people had changed. So had the Iron Valiants. They were no longer just a motorcycle club. They had become something else entirely, guardians of their community. Quiet sentinels in denim and leather who now carried more than stories of the open road. They carried purpose. The warehouse where the children had been held was condemned within days. A few months later, the bikers returned, not with fists or fire, but with paintbrushes and lumber. They built a playground there, a real one. Swings, slides, a sandbox shaded by trees, a place where children could laugh again, where something once dark had been replaced by something filled with light. Detective Sean Parker never went back to the badge. He left the force the day after Rojas was sentenced. Instead, he opened a small office downtown, working as a private investigator focused only on one thing: helping families find their missing children. He did it not for praise or money, but because he believed that justice should begin where heartbreak does. Each of the 14 children rescued that night was reunited with family, except one. A quiet boy named Caleb, whose parents had been lost to violence. Jack brought him home that night and never looked back. The boy never returned to the shelter system. He became part of the Iron Valiants family. He learned to ride, he learned to trust, and he never again had to sleep wondering if someone would come for him. As for Sophie, she returned to school, to soccer practice, and to birthday parties with vanilla cake and too many candles. The nightmares lasted for a while, but they faded. Mr. Buttons never left her side. and the tracker inside the bear was replaced with something even better. A small button sewn into the fabric that Sophie could press if she ever felt afraid. It never needed to be used, but it was there, and that mattered. Every night for months, members of the club took turns parking outside Emily's house. They never said a word. They just sat there, engines off, headlights dimmed, making sure the little girl inside that house could sleep without fear. Miguel Rojas received life without parole. But prison was not the escape he had hoped it would be. Word spread about what he had done, what he had planned. He lived, but not without consequence. He spoke little, ate less, and every year, on the anniversary of the night he lost everything, he received a photograph in the mail. It was always the same. Sophie, a year older, smiling, surrounded by the people who would never stop protecting her. And across the bottom of the picture, a single handwritten sentence. She lived. You won't. They say he cried after every one. No one ever confirmed who sent them. Jack never admitted anything. But when asked about it once by another father who had lost a child, Jack simply said this: "There are men in this world who forget what it means to protect the innocent." I just reminded him. And with that, the engines kept turning, and the Iron Valiants kept riding not as outlaws, not as rebels, but as watchmen. Because, in a world where some monsters walk free, someone has to be willing to ride into the dark, so children can wake up in the light.